Captain Elias Ward watched the fractured horizon of a Rebos, 9 from the observation deck, with a red dust drifted in lazy spirals around the cracked glass. Beyond the outpost, jagged silhouettes of mining rigs stood like broken ribs against the dying sky. The hum of failing generators filled the silence, the kind of silence that felt earned after too many battles survived by luck and loss. He rubbed the metal insignia on his chest, a relic from a time when metals meant something, and waited for the transmission he already knew would come. When the holoscreen flickered to life, the air itself seemed to curdle. The face of a Vaer Dominion officer appeared, his gray carapace gleaming beneath the sterile light. The alien's narrow mouth stretched into what humans once called a smile. "People of Earth," the officer began, his voice filtered through mock sincerity. "Your resistance has been measured, cataloged, and found amusing. Your fleets burn. Your colonies crumble. You were bold once, but boldness is such a fragile thing." The broadcast changed, showing drifting human ships split open like carcasses, their crews frozen in the vacuum. The officer laughed, a sharp, insectal sound that scraped across the room. Elias stood still, jaw tightening as the laughter echoed from the console speakers. Around him, a handful of soldiers shifted uneasily. Their uniforms were stained, their eyes hollow. The youngest, Private Oren, looked as if he might speak, then thought better of it. Elias killed the transmission. The sudden silence was worse than the laughter. "They think we're finished," he said finally. His voice was gravel and exhaustion. "They think the galaxy's got no use for the species that built its own extinction toys." He turned toward the squad, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. "They're wrong." Sergeant Wynn crossed her arms, her movements deliberate and sharp. "With respect, sir, belief doesn't reload our ammo. We've got a day, maybe 2, before they find us here. That's a day longer than I need." She stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled through her nose. "You're talking about her, aren't you?" Elias nodded toward the hangar bay below, where a massive form crouched beneath a tarp. The M-9000 Cerberus minigun was a relic from Earth's old wars, a mechanical monster built to saturate air itself with death. Most modern armies had long since traded such weapons for precision drones and orbital strikes, but the Cerberus remained in Outpost 47's armory, preserved like a museum piece. Its barrels, once polished chrome, were now dulled with age and neglect. Oren, hearing the name, frowned. "That thing even still works?" Elias's gazed in waver. "She will." The outpost lights flickered, casting the soldiers' faces in quick flashes of shadow. Elias walked toward the control console, bringing up the local scan grid. The Vaer fleet glowed on the outer rim of the system, bright points of inevitable doom. "They're not coming for territory," he said. "They're coming for the laugh. They think crushing the last outpost will make a good story for their feeds." Hara stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Sir, if we transmit our coordinates, Command might." "Command's gone," Elias interrupted. "Every relay between here and Mars is cold. We're the last signal left on this rock." He watched the scan long enough to memorize the alien formation, then shut it off. The weight of leadership pressed on him like gravity itself, but he wore it with quiet defiance. These people, Oren, Hara, the nameless engineers keeping the lights alive, had followed him not because he promised survival, but because he refused surrender. Outside, wind dragged the fine red dust against the outpost walls. It hissed like static. The generator sputtered, then caught again. Elias turned away from the window, the reflection of his own scarred face fading into the dark. "Prep the hangar," he ordered. "I want Cerberus cleaned, fueled, and ready. Strip every useless system and feed her everything we've got." Hara hesitated. "You really think one gun's going to stop a fleet?" "No," Elias said, "but it'll make them bleed long enough to remember why they stopped laughing the last time humanity fought back." The squad moved out, boots echoing against metal flooring. The corridors of Outpost 47 were narrow, packed with the stale air of recycled oxygen. Posters from an older campaign still clung to the walls. faded slogans about unity, victory, and home. None of it felt real anymore. Elias followed the team down into the hangar, where the Cerberus sat like a coiled predator. Rows of ammunition belts lay stacked beside it, brass casings glinting under weak fluorescent lights. As Hara and Oren uncovered the weapon, a fine layer of dust swirled into the air. The machine was both crude and beautiful, a defiant artifact from a species that built monsters to survive its own madness. Elias ran his hand along the barrels, feeling the cool metal under his palm. "We called her Cerberus for a reason," he said. "Guardian of the gates." Oren smirked nervously. "Guess we're the damned soul she's guarding." "Guess so," Elias replied. "Let's make sure she earns her name." Hours slipped away in the rhythm of preparation. Tools clanged. Ammunition belts clattered into place. Hara's voice cut through the steady hum of labor, issuing terse commands. For the first time in months, purpose filled the air. Even Oren, once jittery and unsure, moved with focus. They weren't building hope. They were building a last stand. When the external alarms finally wailed, it was almost a relief. The Vaer had arrived sooner than expected. Through the observation slit, Elias saw distant flashes, landing craft slicing through the dusty atmosphere, their contrails burning orange against the crimson sky. "They're early," Hara said, tightening her armor straps. "They're arrogant," Elias answered. "They want to watch us panic." He turned back to the Cerberus, now fully armed and humming faintly as its core capacitors charged. The sound was old-fashioned, mechanical rather than digital, a low, growling heartbeat. He imagined the Vaer soldiers laughing in their dropships, confident that humanity's last outpost was just another cleanup operation. They didn't understand yet. Elias leaned close to the intercom, his voice steady. "All stations, prepare for contact. And someone start recording. If we're going out, the galaxy's going to hear the noise we make." Oren looked up from the ammunition loader. "What do you want to call it, sir?" Elias thought for a moment, eyes fixed on the gun's spinning barrels. "Call it the punchline," he said quietly. Outside, thunder rolled across the barren plains, not from storms, but from engines descending through the thin atmosphere. The red dust rose in choking clouds as alien troops broke formation, preparing to sweep the outpost clean. Inside, the humans stood in the dim light, weapons ready, breath held. Elias checked his sidearm, then placed a hand on the Cerberus's frame as if greeting an old friend. "Let them laugh," he murmured. "They'll stop soon enough." And as the first explosions rippled against the perimeter walls, the outpost lights flickered one last time before steadying, an omen of resistance refusing to die. The horizon burned brighter, closer, the sky filling with the fire of dissent. Elias squared his shoulders, the ghost of a grim smile crossing his face. The laughter was coming, and he intended to silence it. The first blast hit before anyone could finish their breath. The floor shook, hurling loose casings across the hangar, and the air filled with the low, rolling growl of collapsing rock. Elias gripped the edge of the console as dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere above them, the outer defenses were being peeled apart like thin foil. The Vaer weren't probing, they were tearing. Every tremor came with that strange echo, a faint metallic laughter broadcast through the static of their comms, mocking even as they fired. "Shields are gone," Hara reported, her voice tight but controlled. "Outer wall breached at Sector 7. They'll be on us in 10. Then we make 10 minutes count." Elias glanced toward Oren, who was already feeding another belt into the Cerberus. The young soldier's fingers trembled slightly, but his jaw was locked. "You good?" Elias asked. Oren nodded once, without looking up. "Good enough to keep this thing hungry. Hungry's all we need." They'd rerouted every spare generator line to the gun, leaving most of the outpost in darkness. Emergency lamps threw everything into alternating shadows and red light, painting their faces in the color of blood. Hara moved like she was carved from iron, checking ammo feeds, sealing off unneeded corridors. Every order she gave came short and certain, and even fear obeyed her. A second impact followed, closer, shaking loose the rusted ladder near the maintenance bay. The walls groaned, bending inward for an instant, then holding. Elias's headset crackled, fragments of alien speech cutting through. Mocking tones repeating human phrases in distortion. Surrender, surrender, primitives, the word rolled over and over, becoming meaningless noise. He tore the earpiece out and crushed it under his boot. Outside, the ground quaked again. They heard the hiss of the atmosphere vents rupturing and a shriek of metal as the outer door gave way. A chorus of alien engines screamed into the air, high-pitched and too clean to sound alive. Elias took a long breath. Positions. The crew scrambled to their posts. Hara took her place beside the entrance, plasma rifle steady. Oren crouched near the Cerberus feed chute, his job to keep the ammunition belts moving no matter what. Elias stood at the gun's side, one hand on the trigger assembly. The weapon itself loomed like a god of old Earth, its barrels glinting under the red lamps, the hum of its rotating core deep enough to feel through the bones. For a few heartbeats, the world went still. The distant roar faded. All that remained was the low vibration of the charging gun and the rhythm of their breathing. Then the breach alarms wailed again, long and final. The Vaer came through the dust in perfect formation, tall, armored, glimmering under their own bioluminescence. Their limbs moved in fluid synchrony, for arms gripping sleek rifles that shimmered with blue plasma. Elias could see their mandibles flexing in what might have been anticipation or laughter. "Hold fire," he said quietly. The aliens advanced, slow and confident. Hara's finger twitched near the trigger. "Wait." When the first Vaer soldier lifted his weapon, Elias squeezed the trigger. The Cerberus roared to life with a sound that belonged to another age. Every barrel spun, releasing a storm of tungsten and fury. The gun didn't fire, it screamed. The air warped under the continuous blaze of muzzle flash. Casings flew in a golden cascade, clattering against the deck in an endless metallic rain. The Vaer's formation disintegrated within seconds, their shields collapsing under the sheer kinetic brutality. Oren shouted over the thunder, "Reload line 1." The belts churned like serpents through the feed system, glowing faintly with heat. Elias barely heard him. The gun's rhythm consumed everything. The vibrations through his chest, the recoil against his hands, the blinding strobe of fire that turned seconds into eternity. The aliens answered with plasma bolts that carved burning streaks through the air. Hara ducked behind a bulkhead, returning bursts of energy that flashed harmlessly off their armor. Then the Cerberus found its mark again, tearing through their cover, through them, through everything. When the firing paused for reload, the silence felt wrong. Smoke coiled in heavy clouds. The smell of scorched ozone mingled with the metallic tang of heated brass. Elias exhaled slowly. Oren's voice cracked. "They're regrouping." Elias looked toward the shattered doorway. Shapes moved within the haze. New troops, heavier armor, glowing with internal energy. He could hear the hiss of their shield generators spooling up. "They're learning," he murmured. "Fine. So will we." Hara slid back to her station, breathing hard. "If they get any closer, their energy weapons will melt us out of this bay. Then we don't let them get closer." Elias keyed the manual targeting servos, adjusting the Cerberus's aim by feel. "We hold until the barrels melt, or we do." A third explosion ripped through the side corridor, scattering debris and sparks. The aliens flooded in again. This time they didn't taunt. They screamed, the sound layered and inhuman. The Cerberus roared back. Elias fired in controlled sweeps, cutting down anything that moved. He saw flashes of alien limbs twisting apart, armor plates disintegrating into shards. The floor vibrated with the force. The gun's heat alarm screamed, warning of critical temperature, but Elias didn't lift his hand. Sweat burned his eyes. The barrels glowed red, then white. Hara yelled something. He didn't catch it, but she was still fighting, her rifle flaring with every burst. Then, sudden silence. The feed jammed. The weapon froze mid-cycle, barrels steaming, the smell of burnt lubricant thick in the air. Oren scrambled to clear the jam, hands slick with oil and blood. 30 seconds, he shouted. Elias looked out over the killing field. The aliens lay in mounds, but more were coming. He saw them advancing through the smoke. Bigger forms now, armored in reflective plating that shimmered like glass. They brought their elites, he muttered. Hara ducked behind the gun's housing, panting. We can't take another wave like that. Elias didn't answer. He walked to the viewport, looking out into the darkness beyond. Fire spread across the plains, a horizon of orange and ash. Above it, faint stars shimmered through the smoke, indifferent. He thought of the broadcasts, the laughter, the sneering promises of extinction, and something cold anchored inside him. He turned back. Hara, reroute cooling from the barracks to the Cerberus. Oren, prioritize fresh belts, no matter how hot they run. That'll cook the lines, Hara warned. Then we'll burn with them. The system groaned as power shifted. The gun's fan spun up again, a guttural mechanical howl filling the hangar. Oren yanked the release lever, and the jam cleared with a metallic snap. Elias stepped behind the weapon once more, hand steady despite the tremor in his arms. They think we'll break, he said. They think the noise will scare us quiet. Oren glanced up. Will it? Elias met his eyes. Not while I'm breathing. Outside, the alien elites charged through the smoke, their bodies flickering with refracted light. Hara crouched beside the gun, rifle raised, eyes fierce. The Cerberus began to spin again, faster now, the deep mechanical growl building toward a scream. For a moment, there was perfect balance. Fear and fury held in suspension. Then Elias fired. The roar drowned the world. Brass rained like storm water piling around their boots. Every tracer streak carved white lines across the darkness. The alien elites faltered, shields flickering, their advance stuttering under the relentless barrage. Hara laughed thin, wild and defiant, the sound raw against the thunder. When the final shell casing clattered to the floor, the hangar was smoke and silence again. No movement came from the breach. The smell of melted metal clung to every breath. Elias lowered his hand from the trigger, his pulse still sinking with the gun's fading hum. Oren collapsed to his knees, gasping, his face streaked with grime. We're still here, he said softly, almost surprised. For now, Elias replied. His voice carried both pride and exhaustion. He turned to Hara, who was reloading her sidearm with steady hands. They'll come again. They always do. Hara nodded once, her eyes meeting his. Then so will we. Elias looked at the Cerberus, its barrels steaming, its frame trembling from heat. Rest while you can, he said quietly. The next wave won't be laughing. Beyond the shattered doorway, faint echoes rose again. Alien signals forming words half buried in static. This time, the laughter sounded strained, uncertain, almost human. Smoke clung to the hangar like a second skin, heavy and metallic. The Cerberus stood silent for the first time in hours, its barrels glowing faintly orange from the heat. The air smelled of burned lubricant and ionized dust. Elias wiped the sweat and grime from his forehead with the back of his sleeve, staring through the haze toward the breach. The silence on the comms was unbearable. The Vaer had gone quiet. He knew what that meant. They weren't retreating, they were preparing. Hara was bent over a console, rerouting coolant systems that barely worked. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, though her movements were slower now. Fatigue had crept into her face, softening the iron beneath her eyes. Oren sat beside the gun's feed chute, breathing hard, the loader resting in his lap. The floor around him was carpeted in brass casings, some still warm enough to sear through fabric. He stared at them like they were metals. They'll be back, Elias said. Hara didn't look up. They're regrouping. The next wave won't come piecemeal. They'll send everything they have. Good, he said. Then we can stop wasting ammo. Oren gave a dry, humorless laugh. You really think we'll live through another round of that? Elias met his gaze. We don't need to live through it. We just need to make sure they remember it. He walked to the viewport, the cracked glass now webbed with fractures from concussive blasts. Outside, the plains of Erebos. 9 were a graveyard of alien corpses and scorched vehicles. The dust storms had turned red from mingled blood and soil. Lightning flashed in the clouds above, silent and distant. It felt almost peaceful until the radar alarm wailed. Hara's console came alive with signatures, a cluster of blips spreading across the grid like a disease. Multiple dropships inbound. No more scouts. This is a full strike team. Elias's expression didn't change. Positions. Keep it tight. If Cerberus jams again, we're finished. Oren pushed himself to his feet, rolling his shoulders. Let's make them earn it. The outpost lights flickered, then steadied under auxiliary power. The Cerberus began to hum as Elias powered up the spin system, its engines purring like something alive. The sound filled the hangar, deep and resonant, the heartbeat of human defiance. Through the haze, they saw movement. Dozens of Vaer soldiers advancing in a synchronized line, their armor reflecting the orange light of distant fire. Behind them came the larger ones, towering figures with reinforced plating and weapon mounts built into their bodies. The air shimmered with the heat of their plasma cannons. Oren muttered under his breath, "They brought the gods." Elias adjusted his aim, steady hands on the control grips. Then let's remind the gods what fear feels like. The aliens opened fire first. Blue plasma bolts slammed into the outpost, melting metal and splintering concrete. The noise was deafening, a continuous chorus of thunder and electric hiss. Hara ducked behind a support beam, returning fire with measured bursts. Oren ran ammunition feeds like a machine, eyes narrowed, muscles trembling from effort. Then the Cerberus unleashed. It began as a low growl, rising into a scream that tore through the air. The gun spat fire, its rotating barrels spinning at full speed, throwing out death at 3,000 rounds per minute. The recoil shuddered through the deck. Every round streaked into the advancing Vaer, shredding shields, puncturing armor, turning their perfect formations into chaos. Elias barely noticed the heat building around him. His hands felt fused to the grips, his vision tunneled through the muzzle flash. Every sound blurred into a single rhythm. The mechanical roar of the Cerberus and the staccato clatter of brass hitting steel. Hara shouted over the din, left flank breaking through. Elias pivoted, the gun's motors whining. The barrels swept across the flank, carving a path of ruin. Alien bodies burst apart in sprays of blue ichor. The smell of ozone filled the air. Still they advanced, stepping over their fallen with mechanical resolve. More ammo. Oren yelled, his voice raw. Elias eased the trigger for half a second, long enough for Oren to slap in a new feed belt. The gun never fully stopped humming. The moment the belt locked, Elias opened fire again. The sound battered the walls until every surface vibrated. A plasma round struck the deck near Hara, throwing her backward. She hit hard, her rifle clattering away. Elias saw the smoke rising from her shoulder armor as she struggled to sit up. "I'm fine," she shouted, though her voice was strained. Elias didn't look back again. The Vaer elites were closing the distance. One leapt through the gunfire, its armor glowing as it absorbed the kinetic energy. Elias swung the barrels up and met it midair. The gun's scream deepened, every round punching through until the creature exploded in mid-leap, raining fragments of armor and blood. The Cerberus shook violently under sustained fire, warning lights flashing across the console. Oren's hands were a blur, feeding new belts, slamming overheated ones aside. The floor was a sea of casings, rising almost to his knees. Temperature critical. Hara shouted, her voice hoarse. "Doesn't matter," Elias barked. "Keep feeding it." The barrels glowed white-hot, the heat turning the air into a shimmering haze. The Vaer lines wavered, their formation breaking. For the first time, Elias heard something new in their voices over the open comms. Not laughter, not mockery, but panic. Their words were sharp and fast, filled with disbelief. "They thought we'd run," he muttered. "They thought wrong." He kept firing until the air itself screamed. The Cerberus's mounting bolts rattled loose. Sparks burst from the coolant lines. Oren's gloves smoked from the heat of the ammo casings. The roar of the gun became a single, continuous note, vibrating through metal and bone alike. One by one, the aliens began to fall back. Their ranks crumbled under the relentless torrent. A few fired blindly before collapsing, their weapons still glowing in dead hands. The horizon outside became a wall of smoke and flame. The storm of bullets had carved a trench through the invaders so deep it was visible from the upper decks. Elias eased the trigger. The Cerberus slowed, its barrels spinning down to a weary hum. Silence returned, thick and surreal. The only sound was the hiss of cooling metal and the soft click of casings settling across the floor. Oren collapsed against the wall, hands shaking uncontrollably. "We did it," he whispered. Hara limped closer, her armor scorched, her hair matted with soot. "They're pulling back." "You scared them, sir." Elias didn't smile. He looked at the devastation beyond the breach. Fields of dead Vaer glinting in the firelight, their once sleek armor dented and broken. "No," he said softly. "We reminded them." He knelt beside the Cerberus, resting a hand on its frame. The gun was smoking, its surface warped from heat, but still whole. The barrels were etched with streaks of molten residue that shimmered like scars. "You did good," he murmured. Oren's voice trembled. "They'll come again, won't they?" "They always do," Elias replied. "But next time, they'll remember what this sound means." Hara's gaze followed his to the gun. The echo of its thunder still lingered in the air, fading slowly into the silence. "What if they bring more? Then we'll make more noise." Lightning flashed outside, reflecting off the shattered viewport. The red dust was beginning to fall again, settling over the alien dead, over the gun, over the humans who refused to yield. Elias rose, his movements slow but steady. He looked out into the storm and felt something fierce stir in his chest. Not hope exactly, but something close to pride. "They mocked," he said quietly, "and we answered." The Cerberus gave one last mechanical sigh as it cooled, smoke curling from its barrels like the breath of a sleeping beast. Elias stood beside it, shoulders squared, waiting for whatever came next. Beyond the ruins, faint glimmers of light appeared on the horizon. More dropships, distant but coming fast. The quiet between storms never lasted long. "Reload," he said. "We're not done yet." The wind over Erebos, 9 had changed. It carried the scent of ozone and scorched metal, the remains of a battle that had tried to erase humanity and failed. The horizon glowed with the slow burn of retreating fires, and the silence that followed was not peace, but exhaustion made tangible. Elias stood beside the Cerberus, one hand resting on its warped frame. The barrels no longer smoked. They were blackened, cooled, and still, as if the machine itself were mourning the quiet. The outpost lights flickered weakly, surviving only on backup power. Every hum, every mechanical click seemed louder now that the gun was silent. Oren crouched nearby, his hands raw and blistered, sorting through what little ammunition remained. His eyes were unfocused, staring through the shells as though seeing ghosts. Hara sat against a wall, her armor cracked, her left arm bound with a strip of torn fabric. The glow from a shattered console painted her face in dull amber. No one spoke for a long while. The only sound was the occasional pop of cooling metal and the distant groan of collapsing structures outside. Elias finally broke the silence. "Status." Oren blinked, as if waking from a dream. "Power's down to 40%. Cooling's gone. We've got maybe half a belt of rounds left, if that." Hara's voice was rough, almost a whisper. "We should have been dead hours ago." "Maybe," Elias said. He looked out through the fractured viewport. The red dust storm had calmed, settling gently over the battlefield. Alien bodies lay scattered in heaps, their armor glinting faintly under the low light. They thought this would be simple. They didn't expect us to keep firing. Oren gave a tired laugh that turned into a cough. "Sir, we can't hold another assault. The next wave." "There won't be a next wave," Elias interrupted. "Not for us." He walked to the central console and activated what little of the comms array still functioned. The screen flickered, struggling to hold an image. The antenna above the outpost had been half melted during the siege, but a weak signal was still there, barely alive. "If anyone's still listening out there," he said, voice steady, "this is Captain Elias Ward of Outpost 47. We held. We gave him hell. Record this, and remember it." Static swallowed the last words, but the transmission light stayed green. It was enough. Hara pushed herself to her feet, wincing. "You really think anyone's left to hear that?" Elias turned to her, his expression unreadable. "If no one's left, then the message is for them." He nodded toward the dead outside. "They wanted to mock us. Let them hear what defiance sounds like." A faint tremor shook the floor. The lights flickered again. Oren tensed. "They're back." Elias listened. The sound wasn't the sharp rumble of an assault, but a slow, deep vibration, the rhythmic pulse of ships taking off. He exhaled. "No, they're leaving." The realization spread through the room like warmth after frost. The Vaer fleet was withdrawing. The monsters who had come laughing were gone, their arrogance buried beneath the dust. Hara slumped back down, eyes closing. "We scared them off." "No," Elias said quietly. "We reminded them who we are." Outside, the last of the Vaer transports climbed toward the atmosphere, their engines carving streaks of blue light across the dark sky. For the first time in months, Erebos 9 was quiet. Elias looked at the Cerberus again, the gun that had bought them that silence. Its barrels were blistered and warped, but it had not failed. Humanity's defiance had a voice, and it spoke in thunder. Oren broke the stillness. "What now?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He watched the horizon, where the first faint hints of dawn seeped through the smoke. "Now we wait," he said finally. "Help will come, or it won't. Either way, they'll remember this place." He moved toward the console again, adjusting the frequency on the comms. The signal wavered but held. He began replaying the audio log of the battle, the endless roar of the Cerberus, the clash of fire and fury. The sound filled the room like a heartbeat. Hara looked up, startled. "You're broadcasting it?" Elias nodded. "Every channel, every band. If they try to jam it, they'll hear it first." Oren stared at the screen, where the transmission bar climbed slowly upward. "You think that'll matter?" "It already does," Elias said. The sound looped again. The thunder, the roar, the echo of defiance at 3,000 rounds per minute. Somewhere beyond the static, faint signals flickered back, echoes of other transmitters awakening, other humans listening. The recording spread outward like wildfire through the darkness, across colonies and shattered fleets, through the remnants of humanity still hiding among the stars. Hara leaned her head back against the wall. "If they hear it, they'll know we fought. They'll know we laughed last," Elias said. Time moved strangely after that. The hours blurred, stitched together by the slow rhythm of breathing and the steady hum of the transmission. Oren fell asleep where he sat, the loader still clutched in his hands. Hara watched over him, eyes half closed, her exhaustion tempered by quiet satisfaction. Elias remained standing, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the storm beyond the viewport. We finally spoke again. His voice was low, almost himself. "They called us primitive. They called us obsolete. But when the laughing started, they forgot what we were built for." He reached down, touching the Cerberus once more. The metal was cool now, lifeless but proud. "You did your part," he whispered. "Rest." Outside, the first full rays of dawn cut through the clouds, touching the battlefield in gold. The alien dead shimmered like fallen statues, and the dust lifted gently from their armor, revealing the ground beneath, scarred but still there. Hara rose and stood beside him. "If Command ever hears this, they'll name a ship after her," she said, nodding toward the gun. Elias smiled faintly. "They'll name it after the sound." The wind shifted again, carrying with it a faint echo, human voices faintly overlapping on the comms, static interspersed with fragments of words. Erebos signal, repeating, survivors confirmed. Oren stirred, blinking awake. "Sir, did you hear that?" Elias turned the receiver, fine-tuning the frequency until the message cleared. "Outpost detected assistance en route. Hold position." Hara let out a sound that might have been a laugh, though it caught halfway between disbelief and relief. "We're not ghosts after all." Elias didn't reply. His body sagged slightly, the weight of survival heavier than battle had been. He sat down beside the Cerberus, resting his back against its frame. "Then I guess we keep holding," he said softly. Oren looked at him, unsure. "You think they'll send enough to rebuild?" "Maybe," Elias said. "Or maybe they'll just find what's left and play the recording. Either way, they'll know how hard we hit back." The sound of approaching engines grew louder outside, distant but real. The rescue fleet, small and battered, descended through the smoky dawn. Their lights cut thin beams through the haze, scanning the wreckage below. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the vibration of their arrival in the floor. He thought of all the laughter that had filled the air before the battle, all the arrogance that had driven the Vaer to believe humanity would fall quietly. Then he thought of the Cerberus, of Hara's steadiness, of Oren's trembling courage. When he opened his eyes, the light from the viewport was clean and white. The fires had burned themselves out. The storm was gone. He stood with effort, every movement heavy. Hara and Oren followed, silent, waiting for orders. He looked once more at the horizon. The rescue ships were landing, their dust plumes rising like banners. "Get ready," Elias said. "Let's greet them properly." Oren hesitated. "What should we say?" Elias gave a faint, tired smile. "Just tell them the truth." He looked back at the Cerberus, the gun that had turned mockery into legend. "Tell them we stopped the laughing." The wind shifted once more, sweeping across the field of brass casings, carrying with it the last traces of smoke and the faint, fading echo of a gun that had roared at 3,000 rounds per minute. Humanity's laughter had changed, no longer mocked, but remembered,